of a white Christmas.
Every Christmas, without fail, Bing Crosby's voice fills homes all over the world. White Christmas, Silent Night, that warm, unhurried voice that somehow makes everything feel safe and familiar, and exactly the way Christmas is supposed to feel. He has sold over 500 million records, more than almost any artist in history. Children who have never heard of him still grow up hearing him every December without even knowing his name, because his voice has become so woven into what Christmas sounds like that most people have stopped noticing it's even there. His son Gary noticed it every year. Gary was the one who finally wrote the book in 1983 describing in detail what it was actually like to grow up as Bing Crosby's child. The beatings, the belt, the fear of doing anything wrong because the punishment would be immediate and severe, and their father would go back to being warm and charming the moment it was over. The same voice, the same smile, the same man the whole world adored. Gary's brother Dennis said the same things publicly. His brother Phillip said the same things. His brother Lindsay never got the chance to say anything because Lindsay killed himself in 1989. Every Christmas, that voice plays in 1 billion homes. His own children said they were afraid of him their entire lives. That is the story nobody talks about when they talk about Bing Crosby. Bing Crosby was the most commercially successful entertainer of the 20th century. Not one of the most successful, the most successful, by almost every metric that existed. Between the 1930s and the 1950s, he was simultaneously the top-selling recording artist in the world, the biggest box office draw in Hollywood, and the most listened-to voice on American radio, all at the same time, in all three industries at once. No one before him had managed that, and very few have come close since. The image he projected in all of it was entirely consistent, relaxed and genial, a little self-depreciating. The kind of man who seemed like he would be genuinely pleasant to be around. The kind of man you could trust. His most famous role, Father Chuck O'Malley in Going My Way, won him the Academy Award for Best Actor in 1944, and the character became so associated with him in the public mind that people often seem to forget it was a performance at all. He played a warm, patient, deeply dissent Catholic priest, and audiences believed it completely because Bing Crosby seemed like exactly that kind of man. His children knew a different man entirely, and the gap between the two versions of Bing Crosby is one of the most disturbing contradictions in the history of American entertainment. Bing Crosby married his first wife, actress Dixie Lee, in 1930, the same year his career began its ascent toward dominance. They had 4 sons together: Gary, Dennis, Phillip, and Lindsay. By all outward appearances, it was a picture-perfect Hollywood family, and Bing worked hard to make sure the public saw it that way. He gave interviews about the importance of family. He talked about his boys with warmth and pride. The image was immaculate. Behind it, Dixie Lee was quietly drinking herself to death. She was an alcoholic throughout most of the marriage, and Bing's response to it was largely to ignore it, to be absent, to be on the road or in the studio or on a film set while his wife deteriorated at home. She died of ovarian cancer in 1952. She was 40 years old. Their sons were teenagers. What those boys said about their father after they were old enough to say it publicly was detailed and consistent and deeply uncomfortable to read. Gary Crosby's 1983 memoir, Going My Own Way, described a childhood structured around fear. Bing Crosby believed in corporal punishment in a way that went far beyond what even the standards of that era considered acceptable. The belt came out for infractions that most parents would have handled with a conversation. It came out in front of guests. It came out on Christmas morning. Gary described one incident after another in which his father's response to normal childhood mistakes was physical, immediate and disproportionate. And then Bing would walk out the door and go be charming and relaxed for whatever camera or microphone was waiting for him that day. Dennis and Phillip confirmed everything Gary wrote. All three brothers described the same pattern, the same coldness, the same discipline that functioned more like punishment for its own sake than any attempt at parenting. What comes through most clearly in the accounts from Gary, Dennis, and Phillip is not just the physical punishment, but the emotional coldness that surrounded it. Bing Crosby was not a man who struggled to express warmth in general. He expressed it constantly, professionally, to audiences of millions. What he withheld from his own children was deliberate in a way that is hard to explain away as simply the product of a different era or a different understanding of parenting. Gary wrote that his father was incapable of saying he loved his sons. Not reluctant, incapable. That the words simply did not come. Not after a good performance. Not after a success. Not in any of the moments where a child looked to a parent for some signal that they matter. What came instead was criticism, silence, or the belt. And when none of those were required, what came was absence. Because Bing Crosby was always working, always somewhere else, always more present for the people who paid to see him than for the people who needed him at home. His sons tried to follow him into entertainment, partly because it was the world they had grown up around, and partly, Gary admitted, because they were still trying to find some way to get their father's approval. Bing attended their performances occasionally. He was not warm about what he saw. Gary, in particular, struggled with alcoholism for most of his adult life, and when he spoke about it publicly, he was direct about connecting it to his childhood, to growing up in a home where warmth was a public performance and fear was a private reality. And then there was Lindsay. Lindsay Crosby was the youngest of the four sons from Bing's first marriage, and by the accounts of people who knew him, he was the one who struggled most to find any footing in the aftermath of the childhood they all had shared. He married young, had children, tried to build something, and found it consistently difficult to hold together. The patterns his brothers had described, the drinking, the emotional unavailability, the difficulty with intimacy, showed up in Lindsay's life in ways that were harder for him to manage than they had been for his brothers. In 1989, Lindsay Crosby killed himself. He was 51 years old. His brothers spoke publicly about his death in terms that made clear they did not believe it had happened in isolation, that it was connected to something that had started long before any of them were adults. Bing Crosby had died 12 years earlier, in 1977, and so he was not alive to respond to any of it. Gary's book came out 6 years after Bing's death. The public response to it was complicated, in the way that public responses to these revelations always are, divided between people who found it credible and devastating, and people who found it inconvenient and preferred not to believe it. Bing's second wife, Catherine, whom he had married in 1957, disputed everything Gary wrote and defended her husband vigorously. His daughters from his second marriage, who had a different experience of their father entirely, also pushed back. But Gary, Dennis, and Phillip did not retract anything, and Lindsay was gone. After Dixie Lee died in 1952, Bing Crosby spent several years as one of the most eligible widowers in America before marrying Catherine Grant in 1957. She was 23 years old. He was 53. They had 3 children together, 2 sons and a daughter. And by all accounts, this second family experienced a genuinely different version of Bing Crosby than the one his first 4 sons had grown up with. His daughter, Mary Crosby, who is perhaps best known for shooting J.R. Irving on Dallas, has spoken warmly about her father throughout her career. She describes a man who was present, who showed up, who had mellowed into something approaching the gentle patriarch he had always pretended to be for the cameras. The discipline was different. The emotional availability was different. By the time his second family came along, Bing Crosby appeared to have found a way to be the father he had never been to his first 4 sons. What that means for Gary and Dennis and Phillip and Lindsay is the most painful part of the whole story. Their father was capable of it. He simply had not chosen to give it to them. Bing Crosby died on a golf course in Spain in October 1977. He had just finished a round, and by accounts from the people he was with, he had been in excellent spirits all day, charming and relaxed, exactly the man the world expected him to be. He collapsed walking off the 18th hole and was gone before he reached the hospital. He was 74 years old. His funeral was attended by the biggest names in Hollywood. The tributes poured in from every corner of the entertainment world. President Carter sent condolences. The obituaries were enormous and almost universally reverential, celebrating half a century of recordings and films and radio broadcasts and Christmas specials. The warm voice and the gentle manner and the effortless talent that had made him the defining entertainer of his generation. Gary's book came out 6 years later. Then came Dennis's confirmation, then Phillip's, then Lindsay's death. None of it has changed what place in December. White Christmas is still everywhere, every year, in every shopping center, and every living room, and every car on the way to visit family. Bing Crosby's voice still sounds like safety and warmth and everything Christmas is supposed to feel like. The image held. It has been holding for nearly 100 years now, and there is no sign it is going to stop. Gary Crosby died in 1995 at 62 years old, having spent most of his adult life working through publicly and privately what it had meant to grow up as the son of the most beloved voice in America. He never got the words from his father that he had spent his whole childhood waiting for. Lindsay never got them either. Every Christmas, that voice fills a billion homes. His own sons said they spent their entire lives afraid of him. That is the Bing Crosby that history keeps deciding it does not want to talk about. If you want more stories about the men the world decided were too beloved to look at honestly, subscribe, because this pattern goes further and deeper than most people want to know.